Hey everyone, thanks for joining me, and today we'll be looking at an amplifier. We'll be looking at the Aiyima B07. And I'd like to thank Aiyima Audio for sending over a review sample. But before we get started, let me make a quick little point. Right here, I have myself some drivers. These are Torx drivers. They have a Torx bit on one side and they attach to your ratchet. Now if you do a little work on your car and you have a Ford or a Chevy, you're probably never going to use this tool. Now that doesn't make this a bad tool. On my BMW, these are super useful. So just because a product doesn't necessarily work for you, that doesn't mean it's not a good product. So now let's take a look at this amplifier. We'll be looking at the Aiyima B07 and let's see what comes in the box. You get the amplifier itself, an antenna for the Bluetooth connection, and a 48 volt 5 amp GAN power supply. Now Aiyima did send me over the wrong prong, but I had plenty of these US prongs laying around, so when you order yours, make sure you specify the EU or the US plug. Starting from the right, we have our volume knob, and it is also our power. If we turn it, you'll hear it click on in. Very nice and smooth. You have some nice knurling around the edges for really nice grip. I really like the texture on the knob. Next, a treble and a bass, and these only control the main outs, not the sub out. And the next three knobs are our sub controls. We have our subwoofer volume, subwoofer frequency, and this knob allows us to cross over our sub anywhere from 50 Hz all the way up to 220 Hz. The last knob is our subwoofer gain, followed by our input selector, and we have three settings. The very bottom one is our RCA in the middle is our aux in, and up on top switches over to Bluetooth. Very nice build quality, nice and sturdy. A fair amount of venting on the side for heat dissipation, and over to the rear. Again, from the right, we have a couple of DC inputs. We have one labeled main and one labeled vice. Next, we have our binding posts, and I'd suggest bare wire or banana plug. The first set is our subwoofer out to a passive subwoofer. Next, our left and right outs to our main speakers. We have an aux out, so we can connect a 3.5 millimeter to RCA, and when we control the volume knob, that will also control the volume of the output there. Up on top, our port for our Bluetooth antenna, and then our aux in. We can use any 3.5 millimeter jack to bring in a line level signal. Finally, our RCA in, again line level only. If you want to use this with a turntable, you'll need a phono preamp. The Aiyima B07 uses a pair of Texas Instruments 3255 amp chips for its amplification. One for the main left and right channels, and the other for the sub channel. And you're going to get around 95 watts per channel on an 8 ohm load on the mains, and around 185 watts on a 4 ohm speaker on the sub outs. As for the Bluetooth, you do get aptX HD, but no LDAC. So why that spiel earlier about those Torx sockets? The reason I brought that up is because this unit has those passive sub outs as opposed to an RCA out over to an active sub. Active subs are much more common nowadays. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't any space in the market for a product like this, as long as you understand what you're getting. Now you can still use that aux out on this one here to go into a sub, but then you're kind of wasting some of your money. In that case, I probably suggest a Fosse ZA3. With this unit right here, you're gonna get the best bang for your buck when using a passive sub. Now, I don't have a passive sub, so let's go ahead and build one. And again, guys, I'm not a carpenter or an electrical engineer. I'm just a regular guy who's interested in making a little sub for this unit right here. And I'm going to make it in the context of a 2.1 channel system for music reproduction, not for home theater. So with that in mind, I'm going to look for an 8-inch subwoofer to just add that last bottom octave into my system. My speakers are pretty full range, going down to 30 Hz, so I'm hoping that this unit will just help fill out that last octave. So everyone, if you're not interested in build videos, skip over for 10 minutes to my sound impressions. So the first thing I did here is I went over to Parts Express webpage, and I went ahead and clicked on 8-inch woofer because I am pairing this specifically with the B07. I didn't want to go crazy on the size. And I also clicked on 4 ohms on the impedance. And that brought me a list. So my budget's going to be under $200 total. So I'm looking at two right here. The GRS 8SW4HE, which is their high excursion 8-inch at $49.98. Or the Dayton Audio DCS 205-4 at $69.98. I downloaded the spec sheets on both of these, and looking at the GRS, it looks totally fine under 200 Hz. That's all we're worried about. We don't care about all those squiggles above 1K, as we're not going to use this as a full range driver. We're only worried about the sub frequencies. Looking at the sensitivity, this one's at 85 dB sensitive. Then I switched over to the Dayton. On this one, much flatter to 1K. But again, we're not concerned about that. All I care about is how it's going to do under 200. But this one has a sensitivity at 88.6 decibels. So I'm going to get around 3 decibels more for an additional $20. So I'm thinking this is the option I'm going to go with. From the spec sheet, I got the necessary parameters. I input them into Subwoofer Design Toolbox, and I also inputted the size that I wanted for the box, 1 cubic foot on this one. In the port design section, I put that I was going to use a 2-inch port, and it calculated a length of 7.95 inches for me. Then in the enclosure designer, I typed in that I was going to use 3/4 inch material. The outside dimensions, I went ahead and typed 10 inches on the X dimension and 15 inches on the Y dimension and hit the calculate button on the Z, and the software gave me the 16.56 inches for the Z dimension. With this information, I emailed Parts Express and I told them that I'd be using the Aiyima B07. I told them the power parameters of that amplifier. They did confirm that the Dayton Audio sub would be a wonderful fit and a good pairing with that amplifier to handle 150 watts RMS. And they also confirmed that the 8 inches on the port would work well to give me a -3 dB at 30 Hz out of the sub. So with this information, I did a little more shopping. I added the 2-inch flared precision port, a couple of sheets of the 1-inch sonic barrier sound dampening material to cut down on internal reflections, and a set of binding posts. This gave me a parts total of $114.72. I still needed a sheet of 3/4 inch plywood, and I got that at my local lumberyard for $45, putting my total at around $160. So on to the build. Here I have a 4 foot by 3 foot sheet of MDF, and it's 3/4 inch. And I don't have a table saw or a track saw, so I'm gonna make my own track. We'll give all the edges a quick little sand. And for a little extra support, I'm gonna go ahead and put 3 screws down here, and those screws are just gonna help while the glue dries. But I'll leave them in there for extra stability, peace of mind. And first I'll make a pilot hole with a countersink bit. Now we can drill on down. Now we'll get some plastic wood filler and fill up these little hole gaps. Over here we have the speaker box, and last night I glued down the front panel with the sub already screwed in, and instead of using clamps, I just put a couple of cinder blocks that I had and a weight instead of having to clamp it on down, and it should be good to go right now. On the front and back panel, I made them about an extra 1/8 of an inch larger, so once I had this glued down, I can use my router and trim out exactly the size. That's what I'll do now. Next, a little bit of sanding. Alright, so last night I went ahead and cut another 4-inch hole on the back panel for the port. And I glued it down with some E6000, or you can also use like CA glue. So now we have our port glued on down. And I'll just need some holes here for our speaker binding post. Now I'll make some holes for the binding post, and this is the one that I got from Parts Express. I did replace this with some brass nuts because I got these from Parts Express, and as you can see, magnetic parts. We're gonna go to remove those. Super annoying. I wish they would just use brass parts. They do say brass in the description, but I wish they would just tell you that these are stainless and then offer you an upgrade for like $1 more, or just, you know, make them all brass. So anyways, instead, I love those guys at Parts Express. They're always super helpful, but this is annoying. I'm gonna go ahead and solder the speaker wire directly to the brass leads right here. But for now, we'll drill some holes to get this guy mounted right there. So now while the box is open, I'll go ahead and apply some quick seal all around all the edges right here to seal in any air gaps. So here we have the box with the 1-inch sonic barrier all the way around. This stuff's okay. It's about a third of the density of the GR Research stuff. That stuff's much heavier. That one has like a little rubber sheet between the foam and the glue. But this stuff's all right. It's a lot cheaper. But if you have the budget, the GR Research stuff is much nicer. So over here, we have the binding post for the speakers. The port is ready to go here. Foam on the other side. This will drop in right there. But we do have to add the port first. This is the precision port, and I already have it cut. It comes a little bit longer, and I have it cut for the 8 inches that I'll need. I'll just have to CA glue it down on both sides, and it'll be ready to assemble, and then we can paint after it dries. For CA glue, I really like this Saya Fixed from Amazon. This one's awesome. This is a medium viscosity, so it doesn't run too fast or too slow, but it comes with these disposable tips, like 8 of them in the package, which is great. That way you're not getting the main tip clogged all the time. Now I can plug in the cables here and go ahead and close this on down here. And here we have the subwoofer set up, and I gave it that little chamfer to match my main speakers here. But in the back here, we have the sub, the port, and it's plugged in. And then we go back into the Aiyima B07. 2 out to the mains, 1 out to the sub. And we're going to be going from source is going to be the Cambridge Audio 851N streamer, going up to the DAC, which is going to be the SMSL SUX, to our preamp to control our volume, and finally over to the power amp. I am a B07 with a 32 volt power supply on the vice and the 48 volt power supply on the main. Aesthetically, I think it came out pretty good design wise. Instead of putting the speaker in the middle, my partner suggested that we make it a little bit higher for aesthetic reasons only, but initially it was going to be on the shorter side here, but we decided to go taller. And that's the cool thing about doing DIY. If you wanted to make it go flatter, you could have put it on this side and it would have worked just fine as well.
Speaker burn in.
So now my sub has been broken in, and let me tell you what I think about the sound quality on this Aiyima. This B07 really is awesome if you're into DIY. The sound characteristics of the 2-channel system without the sub is pretty much what you're going to get out of a Fosse V3. Super clean, nice and punchy, and very detailed. My speakers are fairly full range. So what I did is I brought the subwoofer gain all the way up to 100%. I brought the crossover all the way down to 50 Hz. And then the output volume all the way up on the sub. Because my main speakers are a sensitivity of 93 dB, the subwoofer is coming in around 88.5 dB, so a little bit quieter. Cranking the gain and volume all the way up makes it blend pretty seamlessly at 50 Hz. Now if I want a lot more boom, I can increase that crossover frequency to 60 or 70 Hz, where I'm going to get some overlap on my woofer and my subwoofer, and that's going to be additive, so you're going to get a very nice thump there. I personally don't like that vibe. That's more of that home theater thundery bass. I like a really quick, clean, deep bass, not necessarily thundery or lingering. Now the very cool thing about this particular amp is that you also do have those tone controls, and those are independent for your highs. So if you were running two small bookshelf speakers and you want to cut some of the bass on those guys, you can just go to your bass knob, turn that down, and you have your bass management. You can start cutting the bass that goes to your mains at around 100 Hertz, and then bring your crossover on the subwoofer up to around 80, and you're gonna have some nice overlap to fill in that 100 Hertz gap. Now, of course, you're gonna have to do this by ear or with a measurement mic, but once you get it fine-tuned, the B07 is an excellent solution for a set of bookshelf speakers and a subwoofer. Awesome for desk use and awesome for living room use. I can't say enough good things about it. In my system, the bass integrated perfectly. While listening to classical or jazz, I wasn't getting very much out of the subwoofer at all. Most of those deep bass or cello notes are probably going to end up around 40 Hertz. However, with rock music, when you start getting that kick drum going, the bass started thumping out of that Dayton woofer. Now on rap, hip hop, and electronica, where you have some sustained low notes, that's where you hear the largest difference. At that point, you definitely hear that last octave come on in, and you do get a little pressurization in the room. It's not my favorite sensation, so at that point, I brought the volume down on the sub itself just a touch. Again, my goal wasn't to add that extra pressure, my goal was to just add that extra octave in sound. Not to say that you couldn't add that pressure if you wanted to. So for me, this is a solid buy. This unit comes in at $199 over at Aiyima's website, but with that you also get that 48 volt power brick, and those GAN bricks go for about 80 bucks just by themselves. So if you see it on that point of view, you're definitely getting a good value. And as you're also getting those 2 amp chips on here, one powering the mains and one powering the sub, it's like getting a pair of Fosse V3s with one volume control and bass management. So guys, if any of you are interested in building this same sub box, you can always rewind the video and pause and look at all my specs there. But if you use that with the B07, please leave a comment. I would love to know what you think about its performance. I hope this has been useful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.